Somebody asked me if I had one wish for Father's Day, what would it be? One wish? I wish that my dad was alive so I could take him to lunch and ask him just a million questions about his life. My dad, Pete Carney, spent his early years on a North Dakota hog farm. So he got up every morning, weekends included, at 3:30. That's a.m. He read the morning paper, memorized the sports page, drank a pot of percolated coffee, smoked an entire pack of cigarettes for breakfast. And at some point in this ritual, he made my lunch, a sandwich, bologna or peanut butter on white bread. Now in the 1950s and 60s, there were three breads. There was Wonder Bread for normal people. Whole wheat was for the Jack LaLanne types. And Roman meal, it had that vaguely, exotic sound to it, like rye or pumpernickel. So it was never really in the running in our house. In a family with few traditions and less money, white bread was ours. It wasn't Wonder Bread, though. We were always off-brand with Alpha Beta White. But if the sandwich assembled, he'd cut it in half and wrap it in wax paper, a piece of fruit, some cookies, maybe cookies, and voila, lunch. A few hours later, long after he'd trundled off to work in Douglas aircraft wearing his squishy-soled shoes and carrying a barn-shaped steel lunchbox, I snatched up that brown paper bag irritatedly and walked out. Nobody had a backpack in those days, so there was no way to hide a brown bag lunch. It was the lowest rung on the totem pole in that unacknowledged caste system called school. Cool kids got lunch money. Kids who, like me, got bagged sandwiches. Kids who carried brown bags were sniffed at or dangled over trash cans. So when I reached school, I found the closest one I could, and I chucked that thing, that abomination, into that can. Every day, my whole school career, I may have been hungry at noon, but I'd rather be hungry than humiliated. My old man had a 5th grade education. One of 15 kids. He joined the Marines in 1935 and was captain of his Marine Corps baseball team, Marine Corps basketball team, Marine Corps football team. He served in Shanghai in the 1930s, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, and re-enlisted to become a drill instructor and to fight in the Pacific. He met my mom, taught himself to be a carpenter, and then a cabinet maker. Now, we weren't much into feelings at our house. In fact, I had 3 other brothers who died at birth, 2 older and 1 younger. We never talked about it. Then there was me. I had asthma. I was a wheezer. Couldn't ride a bike, scared to swim, couldn't catch a baseball with a circus net. The original nowhere man, but you'd be surprised how far you can get if you're a good speller. My parents supported all my attempts, but the ever-present weight of loss, those 3 dead babies, went with them and me everywhere. Who can live up to those expectations? So I grew to react to my dad's attempts to be closer to me with indifference. Anger and hate have nothing on indifference. Indifference is the unintended currency of disappointment. Not anger, indifference, not hate, is the opposite of love. But my father persisted in enjoying his life, and I steeled myself against his insufferable happiness. He loved working in the garage, listening to Vin Scully on the Motorola and fixing a neighbor's gate. When I was interested in marionettes, he built me a world-class marionette theater out of a restaurant door and some scrap plywood he had laying around, where I held exactly 1 puppet show for 20 neighborhood kids before I lost interest and quit at the top. And still, those lunches came. One day, a few years after my graduation, Pete complained about a pain in his side. 3 months later, the Lucky Strikes came to claim him. After a brutal lung removal and a stream of visits from his family and friends, we sat one night, absently watching TV. I wanted to offer some comfort in his closing days, his shortening days, but it's a hard task making up years of disappointment in such dwindling time. I wanted to ask him how he felt, how he saw his life, what he'd learned. But I stayed silent. And a week later, he was gone. Years passed. By the time I was 30, after a divorce and years of drinking myself into a state of bewilderment, I came to a reckoning. I had to turn myself over to some strangers to try to sort out my life and learn how to live. The lessons were not new. They were his lessons. I just was reminded of them. At the urging of a friend, I went to the cemetery to set things right. I brought what I needed: scissors, paper towels, Windex, and a white carnation, which was his favorite. So I trimmed the grass around the grave, and I Windexed the marker, and I sat the carnation down just so. Cross-legged on the grass, I told him I knew what a disappointment I'd been and how I loved him for what he taught me about life and about being a neighbor, a citizen, just a decent human being. I said I was sorry for not letting him in, for ignoring his feelings about his son. But words are just words, and they tumbled out in a tangle. Weeks later, though, while talking about him to some friends, I noticed a curious sense of peace. After decades of lugging around all of this on my shoulders, his disappointment had become weightless. It was a strangely delayed feeling, like I was seeing it in the rearview mirror. Still, how do you make amends for years of tossed lunches and misdirected bitterness? I visited my mom to rat myself out. Say, Mom, you remember those lunches Dad made for me when I was in school? I threw them in the trash can every day. She glanced out her kitchen window. In a low, sweet voice, she said, I know. How do you know? She shrugged. He told me. Wait, who? Dad? How did he know? She gave me a wry mother's half smile. Every so often he'd ask you how your bologna sandwich was, and you'd say fine, and it was peanut butter. And then he might ask you if the apple he packed was bruised that day, and you'd say no, it was fine, and it was an orange. Drawing on my vast sports skills, I decided to bunt. Well, if he knew I was throwing them away every day, why did he keep making them? She looked at me across her tiny kitchen table like she was staring at a potted fern. And then I got it. He didn't care that I threw my lunch away. His joy was in making it. My mom sipped her coffee. On the day you were born, your dad went door to door with a bottle of Jim Beam and 4 empty glasses and poured drinks for every neighbor on the block, right on their front porches. Let's have a drink. I just had a son today. Honey, I doubt there was anything you could do that would really disappoint him. I'm an old man now. For the most part, life has panned out. I became a teacher and a writer and a dad myself, twice. Daniel at 48 and Rose at 50, a dozen years older than he was when they had me. And from the time they started school, rain or shine, before I got ready for work, I slathered jelly onto peanut butter and squirted mustard onto deli meat on white bread. Dropped it in a brown paper bag with an apple or an orange, or for the more trained generational taste, mango, or perhaps some dried seaweed. A few cookies and a juice box with a napkin folded diagonally. Wrote their names on the bags with a Sharpie and sat them on our dining room table. As I sat them down, I always whispered, "Good morning, Dad." As high school loomed, I asked the kids, "Listen, what if I just give you money so you can buy your lunch?" "Nah," my daughter said offhandedly, "we like the ones you make." So, if I had the chance to take my dad to lunch on Father's Day, I'd make it a picnic with a basket full of sandwiches, and I'd bring my kids along, and we'd all talk, and I'd listen, because life passes by too quickly. A sandwich is forever.